Daniel Hayes thought he had found love in Lena Morris. But what began as passion soon twisted into an obsession so dark it ended in blood. Daniel Hayes had always been the kind of man people described as steady. His calm voice, soft smile, and quiet love for photography drew people toward him. He lived alone in a small apartment overlooking the forests of Oregon, where he spent his days capturing nature through his lens. His photos carried a sense of peace. Waves crashing under golden sunsets, dew on mountain leaves, the kind of images that made the world seem gentle. It was through one of these photos that Lena Morris found him. She was an artist, spending most of her time painting in her rented studio downtown. One evening, while scrolling through social media, she came across Daniel's picture of a red fox crossing a foggy path. Something about the stillness of it pulled her in. She left a comment about how hauntingly beautiful it was. Daniel replied, and that simple exchange became the first spark between them. Their online conversations quickly turned into long video calls. Both spoke about art, loneliness, and the need to create beauty in a world that sometimes felt empty. They seemed to fit perfectly. Daniel found Lena fascinating, full of energy and imagination, while she admired his calmness and focus. Within weeks, they were meeting in person. Their first date was at a small coffee shop surrounded by local art. It was easy between them. Too easy, Daniel would later think. Lena laughed freely, held his hand tightly, and looked at him as if he was the only person in the room. As their relationship grew, people around them noticed how deeply attached Lena became. She would surprise Daniel with homemade dinners, buy him new camera lenses, and post long captions about how lucky she was to have found him. At first, Daniel found it sweet. After years of being alone, it felt good to be loved so openly. But soon, her affection became more intense. She wanted to know everything: who he talked to, where he went, and why he hadn't replied to a message within minutes. When Daniel worked on his photography assignments, she insisted on coming along, saying she just wanted to spend more time with him. It started as little things. She would get upset if he didn't tag her in his posts, or if he spent too much time talking to friends at events. Once, when Daniel mentioned an old female classmate had messaged him about a collaboration, Lena's expression turned cold. She didn't shout or argue, but she didn't let it go either. Days later, Daniel noticed that the classmate had blocked him. He brushed it off, assuming it was a coincidence. By their 6-month anniversary, the perfect image they had built began to crack. Daniel felt suffocated but didn't want to hurt her. He told himself that love sometimes needed patience. But what he didn't realize was that Lena's love wasn't just passionate. It was possessive, consuming, and growing more dangerous with every passing day. The first real signs of trouble began to appear when Lena quit her part-time job. She told Daniel she wanted to dedicate herself to painting full-time, but in reality, she spent most of her days at his apartment. She reorganized his belongings, changed his workspace, and began deciding how his days should go. When he mentioned wanting to travel for photography, she discouraged him, claiming it was dangerous to go alone. Slowly, Daniel's independence began to fade under the weight of her constant presence. At first, he mistook it for devotion, convincing himself that Lena just cared too much. But her care soon turned into control. She began questioning every text message and every phone call. If his phone buzzed, she demanded to know who it was. When he met a client or friend, she wanted pictures or proof of where he'd been. Daniel started lying just to avoid confrontation, telling her he was editing photos when he was actually meeting people. Each time he tried to create distance, she sensed it and tightened her grip. She tracked his movements through social media check-ins, scrolled through his followers, and sent messages to women she didn't know, warning them to stay away. Daniel's friends began to notice his absence. He stopped attending gatherings, replying to messages, or accepting new photography jobs. When his best friend, Aaron, asked about it, Daniel simply said he was busy. The truth was harder to admit. He felt trapped in a relationship that had lost its warmth and become a cage. Lena's mood shifted unpredictably. Some days, she was sweet and affectionate, surprising him with breakfast and handwritten notes. Other days, she was cold, distant, and suspicious of everything he did. She cried easily and accused him of not loving her enough. Each emotional breakdown ended with Daniel apologizing, just to keep the peace. One evening, he found his old phone in the drawer, smashed. Lena said she had dropped it accidentally, but Daniel knew it wasn't true. That phone had photos of his travels and messages from people she didn't like. It was gone now, just like the freedom he once had. He began spending more time outdoors, using photography as his escape. But even there, she followed, sometimes literally. She appeared at his shoot locations unexpectedly, claiming she missed him. When he expressed frustration, she broke down, saying he made her feel unwanted. In his quiet moments, Daniel began to see the truth. The woman he'd fallen in love with was no longer just passionate. She was unstable, consumed by jealousy and desperate to keep him under her control. Still, he couldn't bring himself to walk away. He told himself she would change if he just gave her time. But the more he gave, the more she took. Lena's world revolved around him entirely, and she couldn't imagine a life without him. What Daniel didn't yet know was that she had already started imagining what that life would look like, and how far she would go to make sure it stayed that way. By late February, Daniel had reached his breaking point. The relationship that once made him feel alive now left him drained, anxious, and fearful. He no longer recognized his own life. His friends had drifted away, his projects were unfinished, and his once bright home felt heavy with tension. Lena rarely left his side, claiming she couldn't sleep without him. Her moods grew unpredictable, swinging from affection to anger within minutes. When Daniel tried to reason with her, she accused him of planning to abandon her. He began to understand that her love had turned into something far more dangerous than he had imagined. One cold evening, Daniel decided to end it. He waited until she had gone to her studio and packed a small bag, planning to stay with his sister Emily for a while. But Lena returned earlier than expected. She found the bag, and what followed was hours of tears and pleading. She promised to change, to get help, to be better. Daniel wanted to believe her, but deep down, he knew it was over. That night, he sent a message to Emily saying he'd come by in the morning. It was the last message she ever received from him. When Daniel didn't show up the next day, Emily called repeatedly. His phone went straight to voicemail. At first, she assumed he was avoiding drama after a breakup, but when another day passed with no word, she drove to his apartment. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything was spotless, too spotless. His clothes were folded, his bed neatly made, and his cameras gone. The only thing that stood out was a single framed photo of Daniel and Lena on the kitchen counter, facing outward, as if deliberately placed. Emily immediately contacted the police. Officers questioned Lena, who appeared calm and cooperative. She claimed Daniel had left her 2 nights ago after another argument. She said he planned to move to California for a photography project and didn't want anyone to know until he settled. She even showed text messages from Daniel's number confirming it. But something about her story didn't sit right. The texts felt mechanical, emotionless, unlike the way Daniel wrote. Detectives noticed the messages had been sent from a phone number created just days before his disappearance. When they asked to search Lena's home, she hesitated, but eventually allowed it. The house looked ordinary at first, paints, canvases, and half-finished art scattered across the living room. But in the back closet, they found a cardboard box filled with Daniel's belongings, his jacket, his watch, and a notebook he always carried. The jacket's sleeve had a faint, dried, reddish stain. Lena said it was paint, but forensic testing later revealed traces of blood. As the days passed, suspicions deepened. Lena's online activity became a key focus of the investigation. Detectives uncovered disturbing search history entries, phrases like how to fake a text conversation, how long blood stays visible, and how to disappear someone without a trace. Whatever had happened to Daniel, it was becoming increasingly clear that Lena knew more than she was willing to admit. Weeks of searching turned into months, and Daniel's disappearance became the town's most haunting mystery. Flyers with his photo hung on telephone poles, while local news stations replayed his last known moments. Volunteers combed through nearby forests, rivers, and abandoned trails, but every search ended the same way, with no trace of him. Lena maintained her story through interviews and social media posts, painting herself as a heartbroken girlfriend left behind. She shared old photos of them together and pleaded for Daniel to come home. Her online grief seemed convincing to many, but the detectives working the case saw through the performance. Her story had too many gaps and her emotions seemed rehearsed. One afternoon, a local hiker stumbled upon a burned-out car deep within the Pine Hollow Reserve, a remote area far from any major road. The vehicle was barely recognizable, its metal frame twisted and blackened, but a partial license plate survived the flames. It matched Daniel's missing car. Investigators cordoned off the area, and what they found inside sent shockwaves through the department. Among the ashes was Daniel's camera bag, melted, but still identifiable. The lenses had cracked under the heat, yet his initials were etched into the strap. Forensic teams discovered traces of blood on the driver's seat and steering wheel. The DNA matched Daniel's. When confronted with the discovery, Lena insisted she had nothing to do with it. She claimed Daniel must have staged everything to get away from her, even suggesting he'd gone into hiding to punish her. But investigators had already found more evidence. Surveillance footage from a gas station taken on the night Daniel vanished showed Lena buying gasoline, gloves, and cleaning supplies. She was alone, wearing dark clothing, and appeared nervous as she paid in cash. When detectives asked about the purchase, she said she'd been cleaning her studio. Yet when they checked the studio, it was spotless, far too clean for someone who painted daily. A deeper digital investigation exposed even darker truths. GPS data from Lena A.'s phone placed her near Pine Hollow Reserve around midnight on the same night Daniel was last seen. Cell tower pings confirmed that her phone had stayed in that area for nearly 2 hours before going dark. Forensic experts also found deleted messages between Lena and herself, drafts written but never sent, in which she referred to Daniel as mine and wrote about how I couldn't leave her. Police obtained a warrant to search her car and found more damning clues. Traces of blood under the carpet lining, and a burned matchbook with Daniel A.'s initials written faintly on it. Every piece of evidence pointed in one direction. Lena's obsession had crossed the line from control to violence. The woman who once vowed she couldn't live without Daniel had made sure no one else could ever have him. When detectives finally placed her in handcuffs, she didn't cry or resist. She simply looked at them and said, "I told him he'd never leave me." During the trial, the courtroom was filled with a heavy silence that never seemed to lift. People came from nearby towns just to witness the case that had gripped the community. The story of Daniel Hayes and Lena Morris had spread far beyond Oregon, turning into a national obsession. The woman who once appeared devoted and loving now sat motionless in her seat, dressed in a plain gray jumpsuit, her expression unreadable. Prosecutors presented their case with precision, showing every disturbing detail uncovered during the investigation. They pieced together the timeline, proving that Lena had planned every step of the crime in advance. The jury listened as they revealed how she had lured Daniel to her home that night under the pretense of reconciliation, only for it to end in violence. Forensic experts explained how the blood found on Daniel's jacket, the car seat, and Lena's trunk matched perfectly. They demonstrated how the fire had been started deliberately, using gasoline purchased hours before the disappearance. Digital evidence showed her obsessive internet searches in the days leading up to the murder. The most chilling part came when the prosecution read excerpts from Lena's private journals. Her entries shifted from romantic longing to disturbing fixation. She wrote about Daniel as if he were a possession, not a person. And in her final entries, she described her fear of being abandoned as something she could solve permanently.